Hello, welcome to another part of the Ivy tool. In this part, you're going to just wrap up our tool in a digital asset. So if you followed along, you have this result as I have here. So we have our main shape with Ivy growing on top of it. So our main logic is over here, and now it's time to select everything and make a digital asset. So I'm not going to select the part where I have my input. So let me make some space here. So this is a input that I want to choose here in Houdini or in, for example, in Unreal or Unity. So I'm only going to select from that remeshing step to all the way to that merge node. What I'm going to do next is then either we can say make a subnetwork, or we can go to assets and say new assets from selection. So those are the two ways to make assets. So often I would just use the subnetwork or Shift C. Then you will see that we have like one single node. This is not yet a digital asset. So we have like one single node, and we're going to right click here to either create a basic digital asset, or we can make a versioned digital asset. You can always convert the basic digital asset to a versioned one, or you can just start out from a versioned one from the get-go. So if you're working in production and you will have multiple versions and iterations over the lifespan of a production, then it's recommended using the versioned one, of course. So you can keep track of how many versions did I build and so on. So now we're just going to, for example, use the basic one. So we can create basic one. It's going to call this tutorial Ivy tool, something like that, and press accept. So with that, now we have our menu here automatically popping up. So, and here we can go to parameters and we can create custom parameters. So here we then have our tool. So if I go in my tool, it's just the same as before. We have our whole network. So for our parameters, when I go back to my interface here, I want to create a couple folders. So let's create a folder for the base settings. So just going to call it base settings. Then I'm going to create a folder for the branches settings. So how do my branches grow? How many branches do I have? And so on. And then also one for my leaves. So just leaves. You can, of course, build more folders and structures and so on, but I will just keep it to those three. So let's take a look at our base settings. So we'll bring my menu somewhere here. And now I'm going to just deep dive into my network. And I'm going to select here things that we would like to have as base settings. So what can be interesting here is actually our grid remeshing step. So this might be interesting in case you, for example, have very large or very small objects. You might want to tweak some of these division sizes. So this can definitely influence also how fast something calculates in the tool. If this remeshing step creates so much topology or polygons, then it might be interesting to actually increase this value. So for now, let's just grab the value. And I'm just going to simply call it remeshing step, for example. So remeshing, even though it's more like a voxel type of thing, I'm just going to keep it simple for the user who's using the tool. Or maybe we can just call it input remeshing, so it's a bit more clear on what's happening there. So this can go from 0, so probably we should not go to 0. We should probably just give it like a very low value, so like 0.01, and going from, let's say 0.2 or something like that. So that seems okay. So we can already press apply. Then we have a step here to force our branches a bit more further away from our input. So we can grab this as well, place it on our base here, and say push overall branches, for example. Then we can go continue here with the clipping. So this was to cut off the starting point. So we're going to grab that as well. And we're just going to call this start points. Then we have here our noising step. So we have 2 of them. So either you can create unique values for each of them, or what we can do is we can, for example, just grab the offset, and we can just say noise seed value and press apply. So now we have here this off value in green. So when I click it, I have the channel reference, and I can, for example, copy this and also now paste this here in this offset. I can, for example, do also like a +5 or something like that to have like a bit more variation. Like I said, you can also expose like these other values. You can expose the different type of noising that is happening. So it's all up to you on how far or how many properties do I want to show in this tool. So I'm going to just keep it low for now, and you can always go back and forward in that step here. Then we have the scattering options. So I think by default, this is a good value. You can start to increase this. It will definitely have an influence. So let me, for example, here increase this. So as you can see, like it's definitely creating more density in the ivy. So what we can say is that maybe we can go back to like 150 and we can just call this density. I think density scale is good naming. So we need to be careful here with like the range again. So if you would put this all the way down to this 10,000 here, this might be a lot. So let's just say 1,000. So from 150 to 1,000. Maybe just say from 100 to 1,000. So then here we have the beginning point. So it's set to 50. We can also change this as parameters, but I'm going to leave it as this. We have here the endpoints. I'm also going to leave that because I mainly have here then the density scale to control how much I want. So then we here have the growth. So at this stage, we are moving on to the next folder, I would say, to branches. So here is actually sort of like the growth. So let's just call it growth. Pressing apply. Then we have that step here. Then we can, for example, here take this one. So this is for the so side branches, for example. Or you can say amount side branches. We can do the same here for this one as well. So these are the hanging branches. So hanging branches. Just gonna leave it at those three for now. And then we have the leaf system here. So we can also here grab actually the scaling value. It can also be interesting to actually do that random deletion here. So for example, somewhere here, like when we calculate all our data, just here and there we can delete points. So let's take a look here. What if I say, for example, delete, so we can control that. So we can, for example, grab this and say this is like the coverage, for example. So how much coverage of branches do we, of how many leaves we want. Then we can also here, like I said, we can grab scale. So min scale and then maximum scale. Just gonna make sure we name this correctly. We can actually have this as global scaling. Global scale, yep. We can also build the seed value here. So if you want like some random variations, just bring it up here, global seeds, or it's actually not global, it's more like just focusing on like the leaves. Pressing apply. I'm going to grab the reference here. And I'm going to paste it down here into my variant system. And now we have that here as value as well. So we have more variation. So those are a couple parameters to take. We can also do output nodes, of course. So every time we are jumping out of our tool, so every time we go back here, we know that this is our output. Now for my tool here as well, I actually want to probably delete this step here. So what I've done here is I merged everything together. So the branches, the leaves, and the input, but I actually want to delete that. So that's not needed. Just simply because when I open this in Game Engine, you will actually have multiple times your object. So in Game Engine will automatically be able to see your base object still. We have our folders. So we have these 3 tabs. You can, for example, also say that those are simple menus. This is often when I don't have that much parameters going on. We just have a menu like this. So we can basically see all of our parameters here without having to go to like those different tabs. Also, one more thing here is that if you want to do things more cleanly, I would also recommend you actually filling in the proper naming here as well. Sometimes I would just copy the base name and place it over here. So we actually have a more consistency in the naming here as well. So that's something to keep in mind and look out for. Definitely if you're again working with a production and a production team, you want to make sure that's a bit more structure in your tool. So let's just test out our tool quickly here. So we have our input remeshing. So we can increase this, lower this. You will see that it will have some influence here on how it reacts. We can then here have the pushing value. So I probably don't want this value to be large. Like you can see, we're creating shapes like this. Even though like this looks actually pretty interesting and cool. I probably want to make sure that we are go back to our asset, and this value should be super small. So either what we can do is we can just make sure this value is small here. So let's do something like that. Or in the background, we can multiply by a small value as well. So let me reset the value. And now, as you can see, now this is better to control. So I can just quickly push the ivy a bit more outwards or inwards. So as you can see, like there's now more spacing here, which can sometimes just be useful. As you can see, like having these hard edges is sometimes difficult for the tool. So we're just gonna increase that value of offsetting. So you can see that this can be very subtle. So then we have the starting point. So if I increase this, I will cut off that part here. So if I basically cut off the low, we are actually also creating stuff here. So that might also be interesting depending on how your shape is. Then we have the seed value. So we can just create variation here. That also looks pretty good. And then we have our density scaling. So if you want to have a lot more of this ivy going on, we are just going to increase this density scale. And as you can see, we are creating a lot more branches and leaves. Then we have our branches. So we have the growth of them. So how far they can grow. Then we have the side branches. So I probably also need to configure the range. As you can see, like, even though like this is a pretty cool look again as well, like really like wild look. But I probably want to make sure we don't go like over thousands. So I'll quickly go here, change this to, let's say 1000. And also here, 1000 as well. Or maybe hang should be maybe even lower than that. Maybe like say 250 and press apply. So we still can create a lot of them if we really want to. Like you can see, they are nicely breaking up some of that shaping. So this is without, this is with. So you can definitely see it's adding some nice details. Same here for the hanging ones. I also see that maybe I want to make, maybe we could also do some scaling variations. That's also something that I've not have in my menu. So over here, I did some random scaling. So these values can also be in my menu if I want to. So it's definitely a good thing to also do here as well. And let's go over to our leaves. So we have the leaf settings here. We have then the coverage. So we can basically like create a version that if it's like, for example, more in autumn, where maybe some of the leaves are falling off, we can just start to remove them here. Then you have the global scaling of them. This value might be too large, as you can see. But we can also control the minimum and maximum here. So this definitely should not go to minus. So those are the last things I will tweak here. So let me go back to the menu. Global scaling should be going from maybe maximum to 3. So let's say from 0.5 to 3. This should go from 0.1 to 2. And same here, so 0.1 to 2, for example. Pressing apply. And now we have like some better sliders here. And with that, I'm going to finish off this tutorial. So we basically made a digital asset. You can now use the tool in Houdini to create interesting IIV generator. And next, I want to also bring this into Unreal. And as I mentioned during this tutorial, you can make this menu bigger. I quickly showed you how you can make parameters, and now you can expand this. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for seeing you next one.